Chapter 92, talking about Kyoto outside Sanjo City. The official said coldly again, "We have always known that the drunken immortal residence is your secret place, only that it serves no purpose, so we just keep an eye on it. Who knew that you would be so bold as to do that kind of thing, and then want to run away after doing it? How can there be anything so simple in this world?" After Si Li and his party were caught at the borderline, they realized that every move of their party was all under the secret observation of the Supervisory Academy, and they could not help but feel a great chill in their hearts, and felt a great deal of fear for this secret service agency of the Emperor of the Kingdom of Qing. Seeing that the official was ready to ride away, Si Li suddenly hissed and shouted, "You'd better kill me now. Otherwise, later on, that lord in your court will definitely come to my rescue." The official frowned at him and suddenly spoke, "It should be that lord who will send someone to kill you." At the sound of his voice, the expected roadblocker appeared on top of the hillside in front of the prisoner car and his group. But no one expected that the roadblockers were actually like the horse thieves from the northern border of the Qing kingdom and all the small countries, although there were only a few dozen people, but with angry swords. Against the supervisory Yuan team of only a dozen people, anyone with eyes would know who would be the winner of this encounter. Although the number of horse thieves is not large, but even dared to appear in the place of only 500 miles away from the capital of the capital, and the state army arching Kyoto even knew nothing. If the world knows, it must be will make the dynasty up and down in uproar. At this time, Si Li's face had turned pale. Although she was not a smart person, she also knew that if she fell into the hands of those people, she would definitely be silenced. The official also didn't seem to imagine that that great member of the court was actually involved with the horse thieves of the Whistling Border. His expression seemed a bit tense, and he came closer to the prison car, saying, "Si Li, it seems that you and I will be killed here. It's all at this time. Why don't you tell me which great member of the court who is colluding with the Northern Qi is actually the one, and if there are a few of my subordinates that can escape, and in the future, stabbing up the imperial court, it would also be good to avenge you and me." Si Li's long eyelashes slightly drooped, thinking that she was about to die here, watering her eyes, and was about to open her mouth to speak, but suddenly thought of a hint of something fishy, and raised her head and coldly said, "Your Honor is bluffing me again." The official seemed to be unable to anticipate that Sariri would actually recognize his trick and frowned imperceptibly. Si Li sadly said, "Your Honor should know what kind of business Li is in, and I have learned to read faces since I was a child." Your Honor's voice was slightly trembling earlier, but the hand that grasped the prison car was steadily relaxing, and it was obvious that he was not very worried in his heart. "It seems that this sniping trip is something you have long anticipated. Not bad." It was only at this time that the official realized that this beautiful woman did have the potential to be a scout, and after smiling and looking at her, he said, "If you can't even guess this kind of thing, the Supervisory Academy wouldn't be the Supervisory Academy anymore." In the process of the two of them talking, dozens of horses had already rushed down from the small slope. Silent murderous aura rose up to the sky. This kind of formation obviously shouldn't be what horse thieves should have. Around the prison wagon, the people of the supervisory authority had already laid a semicircular defense circle, only the number of people was too small so it looked sparse and pitiful. But I don't know why, in the face of the ferocious incoming rider, these people's face is a solemn, seems to have long put life and death at risk. Wait. The leading official clenched his right fist and stared coldly at the approaching stream of riders, his shout sounding a yinping tone. If Fan Xian were listening at the side at this time, he would surely be reminded of that foreign word he often heard in the movies of his previous life, hold. The cavalry disguised as horse thieves were getting closer and closer, and the leading officer suddenly took a step back, straightened his right arm, and yelled, "Ready." Right at this moment, the dozen or so officials and soldiers of the supervisory court who had formed a semicircular defense formation suddenly changed their formation into a sharp sudden position. What's even more horrifying is that they don't know where they took out their hard crossbows, raised their flat sights, and aimed at the cavalrymen in front of them. The distance between the two sides is too close. The cavalry leader's eyes stormed out a strange aura. A lead horse reins, actually preemptively accelerated around a corner, from the front of the cavalry team around out, in such a high-speed march. Able to steeply accelerate, forced to turn, the riding skills can be seen very exquisite. Shoot! Just as the cavalry leader pulled his horse's head, the same official who was the leader of the supervisory court softly gave the order. A burst of crossbow arrows shot out. Although it wasn't dense, the machine spring force allowed these arrows to fly at an abnormally fast speed, making a hissing sound in the air that sounded terrifying. Several muffled grunts arose. The front of the cavalry, a few riders were hit by crossbow arrows, fell heavily on the ground. The back of the cavalry was ready to charge up on the momentum, but which expected that the inspectorates actually use a chain crossbow. This kind of serial crossbow is a weapon that appeared in the world only 20 years ago. The arrow box can be loaded with 8 crossbow arrows. It is the light cavalry's most terrifying enemy. As soon as the cavalrymen saw this formation and looked at the crossbows and arrows coming at them, they immediately panicked, splitting from it into 2 lanes to bypass the ranks of the prison wagons, preparing to swallow them in one gulp from the side. If they had charged straight at them, perhaps the effect would have been a little better. But this world doesn't have ifs. As they circled around, a few more riders were hit by arrows and fell, and even more horrifyingly, they realized that there was actually an ambush behind the hillside after the prison wagon. As soon as they saw the dress of the ambush crowd, this group of cavalry disguised as horse thieves immediately lost their fighting spirit and no longer cared about returning to kill the woman on the prison wagon, fled in all directions. At the back of the ambush was a group of cavalrymen covered in black armor, the very same group that Fan Xian had seen when he opened his eyes in this world. It was the Black Cavalry, the personal cavalry specially authorized by His Majesty the Emperor when President Qin Pingping of the Supervisory Academy went out of the capital to conduct the affairs of the academy. The Black Horsemen killed in silence, and like wolves tearing into sheep, they split and surrounded the dozens of cavalrymen posing as mountain thieves, killing all of them with a quick swipe. Stay alive! Leave them alive! Fei Jie, who was sitting on the side of the carriage behind the black riders, watched this scene and wailed anxiously, "Don't get them all killed." The side curtain of the carriage was lifted by a withered hand. The old man in the carriage looked at the situation around and said coldly, "Fei Jie, you are really concerned. These little scum, I'm afraid they don't even know who their master is. Just keep the leader." Fei Jie cursed, "Lord Fan took advantage of your absence and mine to get little Fan Xian into the capital, and nearly had an accident. How can I not be anxious?" The old man snorted coldly, leveled the woolen blanket on his lap, and lectured, "I was returning to my hometown to save my family, and you yourself had to sneak out of the capital. Who can blame you?" 10 years later, Fei Jie still had that same strange look, mottled white hair, brown eyes. He frowned and said, "Who knows what ideas Lord Fan has stored up? My lord, you'll have to have a talk with Sananbo when you return to the capital." This old man is naturally the Qin Pingping who holds the shadowy power of the world in his hands. He smiled and looked at the distant cavalry leader, who seemed to be a bit perplexed, and said indifferently, "I naturally understand Fan Jian's idea. It's just that his idea is really a nonsense stage. If you want these things, it is really better than not," he said repeatedly. Better than not. Just when the two of them were talking, that cavalry leader had long fled far away, swiftly turning into a small black in the distance. This siege was obviously caught in the ambush of the supervisory court. Just that he died not understanding why Qin Pingping, who was obviously in his hometown to save his family, would appear outside Sangzhou City in the northern part of the kingdom of Qing. When he saw the Black Rider, he knew that he had lost. Facing the sinister and venomous Lord President Qin, even his true master only had the cultivation of keeping his spit on his face, not to mention himself. He grabbed the first to get out of the battle earlier, so he was farther away from the Black Cavalry. The Black Cavalry seemed to be a bit tired after the long journey. After chasing them for 2 miles, seeing the distance pulling farther and farther away, they only withdrew their horses and returned to the camp. "Zone chased away, right?" Qin Pingping softly asked the personal follower beside him. The personal follower answered with a stoop. Right at this moment, another gray horseman sped out of the distant woods, silently and far away from the fleeing leader. "That's not Zongqiu," Fei Jie said with a frown. Qin Pingping stared at the gray shadow, and after half a day suddenly smiled. Since he let us see it, he must be one of our own people. Who can maintain a nearly consistent level with Zoncho? I remember that there was such a character in the courtyard many years ago. Wang Qinian? Yes. Chen Pingping smiled. It seems that the lad we were worried about has finally learned something. After sending Wang Qinian out of the capital, Fan Xian lived a period of deep simplicity because it was not convenient for him to show his face after his injury, and he went to the bookstore under planning less often. It was just that nowadays he had long since become a celebrity in Kyoto, and in particular, those two poems that were completely at odds with his experience had made him a controversial figure at the tip of the storm, with those who supported him seeing him as a genius in the poetry world, while those who were against him viewed him as a representative figure for giving out new words. Only no one knew that it was Fan Xian who had brought even those 7 words to this world. There was also a rumor of plagiarism in the shadows, but Miles of Sorrow and Autumn was too dazzling, and no one dared to come forward and say that he had written the poem himself, so this kind of argument had not yet been brought to the forefront. But Fan Xian knows that there will be a day, because he beat up Guobaku and father is the Minister of Rights. Guo family deal with all the literary world, and Fan Xian has always been unafraid to use the worst malice to infer the so-called literati. Because of the controversy and reputation coexist, so from time to time some often participate in the King Jing's Poetry Club. Scholars will take the initiative to seek on the fan house. The name is to visit the robbery after the sun, in fact, are secretly handed over the poetry scroll, want to get fan idol just a few words of praise. Fan Xian was always patient and cordial reception, but for each other's poetry is very stingy evaluation. After all, he has long been ready to get out of the literary world, learned Zhang Xianliang to go to see business. Moreover, he does not think he has that qualification. He is only 16 years old, rely on only the previous life of the great sage's mind, is not ready to accept some into the curtain of the words, which is also too ridiculous. Compared to his poetic fame, the thing that could make him famous in Kyoto and really get most people's appreciative eyes was the assassination incident in Oxley Street. Some of the details of the case, which were known to the people of the world, gradually spread out from the supervisory yuan's. Fan Xian, as the victim, was not only able to save his own life in such a dangerous situation, but also bravely fought back and killed the assassin of the Northern Qi dynasty in front of the palm of his hand, especially when the one he killed was an expert of the 8th rank. The fact that Fan Xian had killed an 8th-ranked expert had instantly raised him to a higher level in the minds of Kyoto's scholars, and no one was saying that he was the Fan family's black boxer anymore. Everyone was talking about the Fan family's son, who was capable of both literature and martial arts, and who had the courage to kill the assassin of the Northern Qi dynasty. To be able to write poetry in 7 steps, and to be able to kill someone in 7 steps in martial arts, is to be called Duke Fan.